The cub blocks her path, begging and warning at the same time. She thought it was just another quiet morning, until a shaking lion cub pressed against her leg and begged her to come. What Emma Lane found hidden in the canyon stopped her cold. A dying mother lion, a terrified baby, and a fight for life no one could have imagined. And what happened next
It's okay, little one.
was truly unbelievable.
You're safe with me.
Emma Lane had walked this trail 100 times, but that morning the foothills felt strangely quiet, as if the wind itself was holding its breath. She paused near a bend where the grass grew tall and golden, brushing against her boots. The sun was still low, casting long shadows across the ground, while she listened for the usual rustle of deer or the distant cry of a hawk. Instead, she heard a soft, irregular sound, a faint tapping, almost like something small bumping against her leg. She looked down, expecting a pine cone or a curious marmot, but it wasn't either of those. A lion cub stood pressed against her shin, trembling so hard its tiny ribs fluttered beneath its dusty fur. Its eyes, wide, amber, glistening with fear, locked onto hers with a depth of desperation she had never seen in a wild creature. Before Emma could even think to step back, the cub inched closer and nudged her again, a gentle, pleading tap of its head, as if it had run out of ways to ask for help. Emma froze. Every instinct she'd learned as a ranger surged at once. Don't make sudden movements. Don't touch. Don't get between a cub and its mother. But this cub wasn't acting like a wild cub at all. It wasn't hiding, hissing, or darting away. It was clinging to her like a lost child. Its whiskers quivered, its small paws dug into the dirt for balance. And then, in a heartbreaking effort, it let out a tiny, broken cry that barely rose above the whisper of the wind. Emma knelt slowly, her breath catching. "Hey there, sweetheart. Where's your mama?" Her voice came out softer than she intended. Almost a whisper meant more for calming herself than the cub. The little creature lifted one paw and placed it on her pant leg, gripping the fabric with surprising intent, as though urging her to follow. Something isn't right. The thought rose sharp and cold inside her chest. Lion cubs didn't approach humans unless they were starving, or unless something terrible had happened nearby. The cub tugged again, pulling at her pant leg with a trembling insistence that made Emma's pulse quicken. Its fear wasn't random. It was directed, focused, purposeful. She glanced toward the slope ahead, where the grass dipped into the beginning of a rocky ravine. Nothing moved there, but the silence suddenly felt heavier, as if the landscape itself was trying to warn her. Emma inhaled slowly, trying to steady the rush in her heartbeat. She scanned the area again, her ranger training kicking in. Look for tracks, blood, signs of distress. She found none at first glance, yet the cub's shaking grew worse, its breaths short and frantic. "All right," she murmured, rising carefully so she wouldn't startle it. "Show me." The cub backed up a step, watching her intently, then turned toward the ravine. It took a few hesitant strides downhill before pausing and glancing back at her, waiting. Emma followed, her boots crunching softly against the dirt. Every nerve in her body was alert now, her senses stretching ahead of her like invisible feelers. She knew predators didn't abandon their young unless they couldn't move, and if this cub's mother was somewhere nearby but not responding, the thought made her throat tighten. As she descended the shallow slope, the cub bolted ahead several feet, then circled back as though afraid she might change her mind. Its tail flicked with frantic urgency. Emma quickened her pace, scanning the terrain more thoroughly. She spotted faint impressions in the dirt, little paw prints, clumsy and spaced unevenly, the cub's, but beside them were deeper, wider tracks, and long, uneven drag marks heading toward the ravine wall. Her breath hitched. Those drag marks weren't from an animal walking. They were from something collapsing. The cub whimpered softly and pressed itself against her calf again. Emma felt her stomach twist as a cold certainty settled in. Something was waiting for her in the shadows ahead. Something the cub was too small to handle, too scared to face alone. She rested a hand on the cub's back, feeling its trembling through her palm. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." But as she stepped deeper into the ravine and the sunlight thinned around her, a quiet dread crept up her spine. She didn't know what she was about to find, but the cub's desperation had already told her the truth. Whatever lay ahead, it wasn't good. And it needed her. Emma felt the truth of that settle in her bones as she followed the trembling cub farther down the ravine. The morning sun had barely crested the ridge, yet the shadows beneath the rock outcroppings seemed unnaturally cold, as if they were hiding more than just stone and brush. The cub moved in short bursts, scurrying ahead, then circling back, its tail low, its ears pinned flat with fear. Every few steps, it glanced over its shoulder at her, urging her forward with those desperate, pleading eyes. Emma tightened her grip on the small radio clipped to her belt. She thought about calling in backup right away, but something in the cub's behavior stopped her. It wasn't just frightened, it was frantic, as if every second without help pushed its world closer to breaking. If she hesitated too long, whatever it was leading her to might not survive. Her boots found the first shelf of the ravine floor, loose gravel sliding beneath her soles. She crouched to examine the ground. More small paw prints, scattered and overlapping, but now also something else. A trail of disturbed rocks, a wide mark in the dirt where something heavy had been dragged or had collapsed and slid. The soil was darker in places, damp in a way the rest of the ground was not. Emma touched it with gloved fingers. Not blood, but water mixed with something musky, thick and sharp. Lion scent. The cub let out a quick, strangled cry and tugged at her pant leg again, its tiny claws gripping the fabric. "I know, sweetheart," Emma murmured. "I'm coming." She rose carefully and continued forward, her breath sinking deeper into her chest the farther she walked. The air here felt tight, like a held breath before bad news. The ravine narrowed into a shallow cut in the hillside, rough walls rising on either side. The cub slid into the gap first, squeezing through with practiced desperation. Emma followed, one hand brushing the stone for balance. The cub paused just ahead of her, its entire body trembling as if even it dreaded what lay beyond the bend. A faint rustling sound echoed from deeper in the cut, weak, uneven, and punctuated by a low, strained exhale. Emma's heartbeat thudded in her ears. That wasn't the sound of wind. It wasn't the sound of a healthy animal shifting its weight. It was the sound of a creature barely holding on to consciousness. The cub darted around the bend. Emma moved after it, and then she saw. At the base of the rocky wall, half hidden beneath a shadowed overhang, lay a lioness, huge, pale-furred, and terribly still. Her flank rose only slightly with each struggling breath. Her body was sprawled awkwardly, one hind leg twisted beneath her as if she had fallen hard. Her side bore the bruise of an impact, dark, swollen, and spreading across her ribs like spilled ink, and her left forepaw was bent at an angle that made Emma's stomach churn. The cub scrambled onto its mother's shoulder, nudging her chin with frantic little motions, trying to rouse her. The lioness didn't move. Emma stepped closer, her breath catching. She had seen injured wildlife before. Elk tangled in fence wire, coyotes hit by cars, but never anything as massive or as vulnerable as this, and never a big cat whose cub was still alive by its side. The sight wrapped a cold hand around her chest. "Easy," she whispered to herself more than to the animals, settling onto one knee a careful distance away. She didn't want to scare them, but she needed to assess the lioness's condition. The cub glared at her at first, its tiny growl barely more than a squeak. Protective. Terrified. Torn between instincts it didn't understand, and the desperate hope that Emma could fix this. Emma slowly held out a hand, palm open, letting the cub smell that she meant no harm. The cub hesitated, then pressed its nose to her glove before returning to its mother, pushing its head beneath the lioness's jaw as though trying to lift it. The lioness gave no response. Emma's throat tightened. She leaned in, studying the big cat's breathing, shallow, labored, growing weaker by the minute. "Oh no," she breathed softly. "You're fading on me." A gust of wind swept through the ravine, carrying with it a faint metallic scent. Emma's eyes narrowed. There was something else here, something that didn't belong. She spotted a patch of flattened brush near the lioness's hindquarters, the earth disturbed as though something had struck her or spooked her hard enough to make her feel. A tumble? A chase? Or something worse? But there was no time to unravel that mystery now. The cub pawed at its mother again, its tiny cries growing sharper, more desperate. Emma felt those sounds cut through her like thin blades. If the lioness slipped into unconsciousness here, in this cramped ravine, they might not have a chance to move her, not even with a full rescue team. Emma pulled her radio from her belt with trembling fingers. The static crackled before Owen Hale's familiar voice broke through. "Ridge Station, this is Owen. Go ahead." "Owen," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've located an injured lioness. She's down and barely breathing. I need a field team immediately." There was a pause. Too long, too quiet. Emma knew exactly what Owen was thinking. A lioness injured this severely, with a cub still present, that almost always meant the mother was already too far gone. "How bad?" he finally asked. "Very bad," Emma whispered. "I don't know what happened to her, but she's not moving. The cub brought me here. Owen, she's fading." Another pause, then Owen's tone sharpened with urgency. "Stay put. Don't leave the area. I'm dispatching the rapid response unit. Emma, you've got to keep her breathing if you can." Emma swallowed hard, her gaze fixed on the lioness's flank. "I'll try." The cub pressed itself against its mother's chest as if trying to help her breathe. Emma felt a sting behind her eyes as she whispered, "Hang in there, sweetheart. Help is coming." But even as she said the words, a heavy dread settled into her chest. The lioness's breaths were growing further apart, each one shallower than the last. Time was slipping through their fingers like sand through a cracked glass. Emma scooted closer, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. She placed a careful hand near the lioness's ribcage, feeling the jittery, fragile rise and fall beneath her gloves. The cub watched her anxiously, ears twitching at every faint gasp its mother made. "It's okay," Emma murmured, not sure if she was comforting the cub or herself. "You did the right thing bringing me here." The cub let out a soft, heartbroken cry that made the ravine feel colder. Emma looked up toward the sky, toward the ridge where sunlight glowed faintly over the canyon walls. Rescue was on its way. But the canyon was deep, the terrain unforgiving, and the lioness had minutes, not hours. She felt the full weight of that realization settle on her like gravity itself. This mother didn't have long, and until help arrived, Emma Lane was all she had. The realization carried a weight so heavy it seemed to settle into the very stones beneath her knees. Emma inched even closer to the lioness, careful not to startle the cub pressed against its mother's ribs. The little one looked at her with a raw, pleading terror that hit her harder than the morning chill ever could. Its trembling grew sharper, its tiny breaths quickening each time the lioness's chest paused too long between rises. Emma leaned down, close enough to hear the faint, rattling pull of air struggling through the lioness's lungs. It wasn't the steady rhythm of a sleeping animal. It was the fragile, erratic gasp of a creature standing on the brink. The lioness's side shuddered, then stilled again, and Emma felt her throat tighten as she whispered, "Come on, stay with me. Don't stop now." The cub whimpered at the sound of her voice, nudging its mother's jaw as if trying to shake her awake. Emma reached out and rested her hand near the lioness's muzzle, not touching yet, just close enough for the cub to see she meant no harm. To her surprise, the cub didn't pull back this time. It simply pressed its body tighter against its mother, as though accepting Emma as part of the desperate circle trying to keep this fading life from slipping away. Emma's eyes moved across the lioness's injuries. There was a deep bruise stretching across her ribs, a dark bloom beneath the pale fur that told of an impact, hard, sudden, violent. One foreleg lay twisted beneath her in a way no animal would choose. There were scratches along the stone wall nearby, marks of a struggle to stay upright before gravity won. The lioness hadn't simply lain down here, she had fallen. The question Emma didn't dare to ask hung in the cold air. What could bring down a full-grown lioness? But that mystery would have to wait. Right now, she had only one task: keep the lioness breathing until help made its way through the rough canyon. Emma bent closer, examining the angle of the lioness's head. The way her neck had collapsed against the rock pressed one side of her jaw too tightly into her chest. If her airway was partially blocked, it would explain the shallow, strained breaths. Emma hesitated. Any sudden movement could startle the cub, and any touch could trigger the lioness's instincts if she regained consciousness too quickly. Still, doing nothing wasn't an option. "Easy now," she murmured, mostly to herself. She slipped her hand slowly beneath the lioness's jaw, trying to lift just enough to straighten the airway. The lioness didn't react, not even a twitch. Her head felt heavy, warm but frighteningly limp, and the tiny shift in position made her next breath sound barely smoother. Emma forced down the tremor rising in her own hands. She had helped injured animals before: deer tangled in barbed wire, coyotes clipped by traffic, but never a lioness. Never something this powerful and this vulnerable at the same time. She felt suddenly small in the face of such fragile majesty. The cub let out a faint cry, startling her. It pawed once at its mother's cheek, then turned its head toward Emma, its expression so full of fear and hope intertwined that she felt her chest tighten. The little creature stepped closer and pressed its head against Emma's arm, a gesture so unexpected that she nearly stopped breathing. "You're trusting me," she whispered. "I promise I won't leave her." Her radio crackled again. Owen's voice came through, more urgent now. "Emma, the team is en route. Mason estimates 15 minutes, maybe 20. Terrain slowed them down." Emma glanced at the lioness's chest. She doesn't have 20 minutes. Her voice cracked despite her efforts to stay composed. Owen's silence on the other end of the line lasted only a heartbeat, but the weight of what he didn't say pressed hard on her shoulders. "Just keep her breathing," he finally answered. "Mason needs you to monitor her airway. Don't move her body. Just keep her head aligned. You can do this." Emma nodded, though Owen couldn't see her. "I'll try." The radio clicked off, leaving her alone with the fading lioness and the cub, who wouldn't stop trembling beside her. Emma shifted her knees on the rough ground, adjusting her balance so she could support the lioness's heavy head more steadily. As she lifted the jaw a little higher, the cub scrambled to stay near, its tiny paws climbing onto Emma's forearm, as though trying to anchor her in place. The lioness's breath fluttered in a weak gasp, then steadied into something faintly stronger, still shallow, still frighteningly inconsistent, but better than before. Emma whispered, "That's it. That's good. Keep breathing." The words were instinctive, the kind of soft encouragement she once used with injured shelter dogs back in her early career. But this moment felt far more fragile, far more sacred. Every breath the lioness drew was a borrowed moment, and Emma knew she was the thin line keeping that moment alive. She scanned the ravine again as the minutes ticked by. The shadows clung stubbornly to the ground, the sun still too low to warm the canyon walls. A cold breeze drifted along the rock, carrying pine and dust and the faintest trace of something metallic she still couldn't place. The quiet around her deepened, making the lioness's strained breaths sound louder, sharper. Emma leaned closer. The lioness's eyelids flickered, not fully opening, not enough to show awareness, but enough to show she was fighting somewhere behind the haze of shock and pain. Emma's heart gave a painful squeeze. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Your baby needs you." The cub curled its small body against its mother's ribs, its tiny chest rising and falling in quick, uneven breaths. Emma reached out and gently stroked the air above its back, not making contact, but offering presence. The cub didn't shy away. If anything, it leaned imperceptibly toward her hand. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Emma's knees throbbed from kneeling on stone. Her back stiffened from holding the same position. But she didn't dare move. Every rise and fall of the lioness's chest counted. Every breath was a victory in a battle she wasn't sure they could win. A sudden shudder ran through the lioness's body, jerking her ribs beneath Emma's hand. The cub cried out, pressing close. The lioness's breathing hitched, faltered again, then returned with a fragile wheeze. Emma steadied the lioness's head with both hands, her pulse pounding. "Come on," she pleaded softly. "Don't go, help is almost here." Almost. But almost could still be too late. Emma looked toward the narrow opening of the ravine, willing the crackle of radio signals or the sound of boots on gravel. Nothing yet. Only the wind whispering between stone walls and the heartbeat she could feel trembling through the cub's small frame. She swallowed hard, lifting the lioness's jaw a little more to ease the airway. Another breath shuddered through the lioness's chest. Weak, uneven, but alive. "You're not alone," Emma whispered. "I'm right here." And in that cold, narrow ravine, cradling a dying lioness while a frightened cub pressed against her, Emma Lane understood why the cub had come for her. She was the only chance they had, and she would not fail them. But certainty didn't steady Emma's hands. It didn't slow the pounding of her pulse or warm the cold creeping through the ravine. It only pushed her forward. One breath, one decision, one trembling moment at a time. She shifted to keep her knees from slipping on the rocky floor and checked the lioness's airway again. The mammoth head rested heavily in her palms, the weight both grounding and terrifying. The cub stayed plastered against its mother's ribs, its tiny chest rising fast and shallow, as if its heart was trying to outrun grief. The lioness exhaled a thin, broken gasp. Emma flinched, instinctively holding the jaw a little higher in the position Owen had described over the radio. The breath smoothed slightly. Not much, but enough to make Emma whisper a shaky, "There we go. Stay with me, girl. Just breathe." The cub's ears twitched at her voice. It lifted its head, eyes glassy with fear, but no longer filled with the suspicion it had first shown her. If anything, it looked at her with something closer to expectation, as though it believed she could fix what was broken here. That belief calmed her more than she expected, and she found herself whispering again, I know, I won't leave you." The radio crackled suddenly at her hip, making her jolt. Owen's voice cut through the static, brisk and controlled, but lined with strain. "Emma, talk to me. How's she doing?" Emma swallowed hard. "Barely hanging on. Breaths shallow, getting weaker. You guys close?" "We're moving as fast as we can. Mason, Tara, and Ben are on the ridge. The terrain slowed them down, but they should reach the canyon edge in just a few minutes." A beat. "Emma, can she hold on that long?" Emma's eyes moved over the lioness once more. The bruise along her ribs looked even darker now, spreading like ink through her pale fur. The rising and falling of her chest felt more like a tremor than breathing, and her eyelids, which had fluttered in faint consciousness earlier, now lay still. She couldn't hide the truth. "I don't know," she whispered. Owen's silence answered her louder than words. Then, steadier than before, he said, "We're coming. Just do what you can." The radio went quiet. Emma set it down beside her and focused on the lioness again. She eased her hand beneath the big cat's jaw to keep the airway open. The cub pressed close, watching every tiny movement she made. It gave a soft, quivering cry, a sound too small for such a wild creature, and leaned into its mother's unmoving shoulder. "I know, sweetheart." Emma's voice broke as she reached out with her free hand and hovered it gently over the cub's back. "You brought me here because you believed she had a chance, so we're going to give her one, all right?" The cub blinked at her, ears folding downward, the softest acknowledgement she'd ever seen from anything so wild. Minutes passed in aching silence, broken only by the lioness's thin breaths and the wind brushing along the ravine walls like distant whispering. Emma forced herself to stay calm, to keep her breathing steady, her hands still, her mind focused. But fear pressed against her ribcage with every second. She kept glancing toward the canyon entrance, hoping to see movement, hear voices. Anything that meant help was within reach. The cub suddenly tensed, ears pricking forward. Emma stiffened too, listening. A faint scrape echoed from the upper rocks, boots on stone, hurried but cautious. "Emma!" a voice shouted, distant but growing closer. "We're coming down!" Relief surged so sharply through her chest she nearly cried. "Mason!" she called back, her voice cracking. "Down here! Hurry!" More scuffling. Then Tara's voice rang out, clearer, more controlled. "We see your location. Stay exactly where you are." Emma tilted her head upward, spotting movement between the stones. Tara Brooks, compact and steady as a mountain goat, was already navigating a steep drop-off. Behind her, Dr. Moisson, Mason Reed descended more slowly, one hand gripping a jutting rock, his medical pack strapped tightly across his back. Ben followed last, lowering ropes and assessing the slope like a man double-checking every risk. But even with the relief swelling through her chest, Emma's fear didn't ease. The lioness shuddered again, weak, inconsistent, each breath more fragile than the last. Emma raised her voice, unable to hide her panic. "She's fading. Please hurry." "We're coming," Mason called. "Don't move her neck. Just keep that airway open." Emma nodded, though she doubted anyone could see it from above. Her arms were starting to tremble from holding the lioness's head in place, but she didn't dare shift. She adjusted her knee slightly to bear more of the weight, making sure her hands stayed steady beneath the heavy jaw. The cub leaned into her arm again, trembling, and she whispered, "It's okay. Help is here." Tara reached the ravine floor first, landing with practiced grace. Ben climbed down behind her and immediately started setting ropes in safer positions for the ascent back up. Mason approached last, dropping to his knees beside Emma with gentle urgency. His face, lined with experience and fatigue, softened as he saw the lioness's condition. "Oh, sweetheart," he murmured, touching the lioness's shoulder with reverence. "What happened to you?" Emma shook her head. "I don't know. She's been like this since I found her. The cub led me here." Mason's eyes flicked to the cub, then back to the lioness. "Good baby," he said softly. Then to Emma, "You did the right thing calling us immediately. Let me take a look." Emma slowly shifted her hands away as Mason slid into her place, supporting the lioness's jaw with practiced care. His brows furrowed, airways partially collapsing. "She's barely getting enough air." Tara knelt beside them. "We don't have much room to work in here." "We don't need room," Mason said quietly. "We just need time, and we don't have much of that either." The lioness's chest spasmed suddenly, the breath catching so sharply that the cub cried out in panic. Emma reached for the cub instinctively, letting it press against her forearm as it trembled. Mason adjusted his hold quickly, but gently. "There we go," he whispered. "Easy, easy." He looked at Emma again, his expression tight but grateful. "You kept her alive until we got here. She wouldn't be breathing at all if you hadn't helped." Emma felt something inside her chest loosen, just a fraction. But then the lioness's breath faltered again, reminding them all how close they were to losing her. "What can I do?" Emma asked. Mason gave her a brief nod. "Stay with the cub. Keep it calm. It'll help keep the mother calm too, if she's still aware enough to sense it." Emma shifted her body so the cub had a place to lean. It pressed its tiny head into her thigh, trembling but no longer crying. She placed a steady hand near it, not touching, but offering warmth and presence. Above them, the wind picked up, carrying the faintest hint of pine. The canyon stayed dim, cold, and tense. Mason worked swiftly, adjusting the lioness's head, checking for fractures, and feeling for any internal swelling he could identify. Tara positioned herself at the lioness's hindquarters, assessing where they could secure straps for extraction. "We're going to need a wider path," she muttered. "This angle's tight." "We'll make it work," Ben said. "She's getting out of here one way or another." Emma listened to them work, her fear slowly shifting into something sharper: determination. She kept her hand steady near the cub, her gaze fixed on the lioness. She whispered, "Help is here now. Stay with us." But deep inside, she felt the truth like a cold shadow. This battle had only just begun, and the lioness was running out of time. The ravine felt smaller by the second, as though the canyon walls were tightening around them, trapping the 3 humans and 2 lions in a fragile pocket of urgency. Emma could hear every breath the lioness struggled to take, thin, trembling rasps that rattled through the cold air and echoed like warnings off the stone. The cub pressed against Emma's thigh, its tiny frame shivering despite her steadying presence. Each faint gasp from its mother made the little creature jolt, as if its heart was tethered to hers. Tara adjusted her harness and glanced toward the canyon edge. "Ben's getting the first set of gear ready," she murmured, her voice barely above the sharp whisper of wind. "We're going to need a coordinated pull if we want to lift her out without shifting anything vital." Mason kept his hands beneath the lioness's jaw, still working to maintain an open airway. His brow was furrowed in deep concentration, but the tightness around his eyes betrayed the fear he was fighting to contain. "Every minute counts. We have to stabilize her enough to move. If her breathing gets any weaker, we may lose our chance." Emma knelt beside the cub, gently guiding it to sit closer to her so Mason had space to maneuver. The cub resisted only for a second, before nuzzling into her side again. Emma felt its trembling travel up her arm and into her chest. "She's holding on," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was saying it for the cub or for herself. Above them, loose stones clattered. Ben appeared at the top of the ravine, bracing himself against a jutting boulder as he surveyed the depth of their position. "We're working on an access route now," he called down. "I've marked the anchor point. Rigging's on the way." Tara shot him a look. "Be careful. The slope on your right's unstable." "Wouldn't dream of slipping," Ben replied with a tight half-smile, though his voice carried more strain than humor. Emma watched the exchange through a haze of fear. Even with the team working in sync, every step felt painfully slow. She looked down at the lioness, whose breaths now came farther apart, each one fighting its way to the surface. "How long can she go like this?" she asked quietly. Mason didn't look up. "Not long. We need to keep her airway clear and her body temperature from dropping. Cold like this can shut her down faster." Without hesitation, Emma shrugged off her ranger jacket and unfolded it across the lioness's hindquarters, tucking it gently around the curve of her back. The cub cried out in alarm at the motion, then stepped aside only after Emma murmured, "It's okay, baby. It's okay. She needs it." The jacket's warmth seeped into the lioness's fur, but her body still felt frighteningly cool beneath Emma's fingertips. Emma swallowed hard. "Please, stay with us." Mason reached into his kit and pulled out a portable heat pack, cracking it to activate the warmth before pressing it gently against the lioness's chest. "This should help," he said, "but it won't do much unless we get her to proper equipment." Tara pivoted toward them, wiping sweat from her forehead despite the cold. "The path on the left is too narrow for extraction. But the right side—" She hesitated, then sighed. "We'll have to widen the opening manually. Ben's working on it." Emma glanced toward the rocky wall where Ben was chipping away at a crumbling ledge with careful strikes of a pry tool. The sound of metal on stone echoed like distant thunder. "Is it safe?" she asked. "As safe as it can be," Tara admitted. "We don't have time for perfect. We just need possible." The lioness suddenly drew in a sharp breath, her ribs jerking beneath Emma's jacket. The cub scrambled closer, its tiny paws pressed against its mother's cheek. Emma held her breath as Mason steadied the lioness's head once more. "Easy," he whispered. "Easy. You're still with us." Then he looked up, meeting Emma's eyes. For a moment, the weight of what they were trying to rescue, the life of a mother, the entire world of a cub, passed between them. "Emma," he said softly, "you staying with her, that's probably the reason she's still breathing." Emma felt her throat tighten. "Then I'm not going anywhere." Tara crouched beside them again. "Ben says we can try the pull in a few minutes. We'll get the first rope down now." Emma exhaled slowly, grateful for any sliver of progress. Every movement, every adjustment, felt like pushing back against a tide that wanted to sweep the lioness away. Ben's voice echoed down the canyon again. "Rope line incoming. Head down." A thick coil of rescue rope dropped toward them, guided by Ben's careful hands. Tara caught it, securing the line to her harness before clipping it to a secondary anchor embedded in the canyon floor. "This will help us guide the lift," she explained. "Once we secure the harness around her torso, we'll stabilize her body for the ascent." Emma nodded, though she knew very well how risky it was to move an animal this size in her condition. A wrong turn, a sudden shift in weight, or a slip of the rope could cause catastrophic damage. Still, what choice did they have? The cub pressed its face deeper into Emma's side. She laid a steady hand near it, whispering, "We're doing everything we can, sweetheart." Above them, Ben called out, "Pulling equipment down now." The clatter of metal signaled the descent of the specialized harness, a wide sling designed to distribute weight evenly across a large animal's body. Tara guided it down carefully, then laid it flat beside the lioness. "We'll need to slide it under her," Tara said. "Slowly. Mason, let us know if anything changes while we lift." Emma shifted, preparing to help, but Mason shook his head gently. "Stay with the cub. It keeps her calm. Trust me." The cub's trembling had lessened slightly, but its eyes never left its mother. Emma felt it lean fully into her now, as though accepting her presence completely. She rested her hand lightly near its back again, close enough for comfort, far enough not to intrude, and whispered, "She's fighting, so we'll fight with her." Working together, Tara and Mason slowly lifted portions of the lioness's body, just enough to ease the sling beneath her torso. Each adjustment made Emma's breath hitch. The lioness's breathing was so fragile that any movement felt like rolling a glass ornament across stone. When the sling was finally positioned, Mason exhaled shakily. "Good. That's good. Now we just need to secure her." Emma looked toward the canyon opening. Ben knelt above, hands gripping the rope line, his expression tight with urgency. "Ready when you are," he called down. Tara clipped the sling to the main rope with a series of sharp metallic clicks. "Anchors are secure. We're ready for the first lift." Mason braced the lioness's head. "Slowly," he warned. Ben began the ascent from above, pulling carefully. The harness tightened, the sling lifting the lioness just enough that her ribs expanded more fully with the shift in pressure. The cub cried out again, scrambling to stay close. Emma wrapped her arms around it instinctively, pulling it gently into her lap. The cub didn't resist. The lioness rose a few inches from the ground, her fur brushing the stone as she moved. Her breathing hitched again, sharp, painful, but still present. Emma held her breath. Tara kept her hand on the harness to steady the angle. Mason whispered encouragement the entire time. Easy, easy. You're doing good. Stay with us. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the cub's heartbeat frantic against her forearm. They were running out of time. But for the first time since she'd found the cub trembling in the grass, Emma felt something stir inside her. Hope. Not loud or bright, but steady, quiet, determined, like a spark refusing to go out. And she clung to it with everything she had. Emma tightened her hold around the cub, feeling its small heartbeat flutter wildly against her arm as the lioness was lifted inches above the stone. The sling creaked softly, the rope stretching under the mother's weight, and the canyon swallowed the sounds in a deep, uneasy silence. Every breath the lioness took seemed like it might be her last, thin, trembling sighs that rattled more than they filled. Emma could feel each one in the air around her, like faint ripples spreading through cold water. Mason steadied the lioness's head as the sling rose. The fur beneath his hands was warm, but the warmth was fading. He could feel it. Emma could too. The cub let out a soft cry and pressed its head into Emma's chest, as though trying to hide from what it feared might happen next. "It's okay," Emma whispered, her voice soft but unsteady. "She's going up. She's getting help." But deep inside she felt the same fear the cub did, that they were racing against something they couldn't outrun. The sling rose another few inches, lifting the lioness until her ribs cleared the uneven stones below. Tara guided the harness, keeping it from scraping the sides of the canyon. Ben's voice echoed faintly from above. "Steady pull. Hold. Another 2 feet. Keep it level." A sudden shudder ran through the lioness's chest. Emma gasped. "Mason, did you feel that?" He nodded, jaw clenched. Her breathing just dropped again. "We need to get her out faster." Tara shot him a look. "Faster might mean rougher. We can't risk jarring her spine. And going slower means she might not have a pulse by the time we reach the ridge," Mason countered, his voice low but edged with urgency. Emma's heart hammered. The cub whimpered, climbing up onto her knee, trying to get closer to its mother. Emma steadied the little one with a gentle hand, its tiny claws gripping her jacket sleeve like it was holding on to hope itself. The lioness's tail twitched, a small, involuntary movement, but enough to send Tara back into motion. "Ben," she shouted upward, "give us another line. We'll stabilize her from both sides." "On it!" Ben's voice bounced down the stone walls. Emma looked at Mason, searching his face for some reassurance. His expression told her everything she didn't want to hear. The lioness's breaths were so faint now they were barely more than whispers of warmth against the cold morning air. A weak, rattling exhale left the lioness's muzzle. Emma felt her own breath catch, her throat tightening painfully. "Come on. Don't do this now." The cub pressed its forehead to its mother's leg, tiny body shaking. Its cries were so soft they barely rose above a whimper, but the sound cut through Emma like a blade. She brushed her knuckles along the air above its back, offering comfort without touching, knowing even that small gesture meant something. Mason leaned closer to the lioness's face, her airways slipping again. His tone held something worse than urgency, fear. "Emma, I need you over here." Emma eased the cub gently onto her lap and moved beside Mason. "What do you need?" "I'm going to lift her muzzle a bit more," Mason said, "but I need you to keep her neck aligned. If she loses too much oxygen, we'll—" He stopped himself. He didn't need to finish. Emma positioned her hands beside his, feeling the weight of the lioness's head settle into her palms once more. It felt heavier than before, like the strength was draining from her. Emma lifted gently, aligning the throat the way Owen had taught her years ago. Mason adjusted the position with a quick, practiced movement. The lioness's next breath came, weak, rattling, but real. "Good," Mason murmured. "That's good. Hold her like that." The cub nuzzled against the lioness's shoulder, paws kneading anxiously at her fur. Emma felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. She didn't have the luxury of falling apart, not when this tiny family was holding on by a thread. Another rope dropped into the ravine, its descent marked by the thump of metal clips. Tara grabbed it and clipped it to the opposite pommel of the harness. "Okay," she called. "Ben, take up tension slowly, just enough to keep her from tilting." "Copy." Above them came the rhythmic pull of steady hands hauling weight. The sling tightened, lifting the lioness another foot. Her head shifted slightly, and Emma adjusted her grip quickly to keep the airway clear. "That's it," Mason murmured. "Keep her steady." But then the lioness's body gave a sudden, sharp convulsion, once, then again. Emma sucked in a breath. The cub let out a piercing cry, its claws digging into Emma's thigh. Mason pressed his hand more firmly beneath the lioness's jaw. "Stay with us," he whispered. "Stay with us." The convulsions stopped. For a single, terrible moment, there was no movement at all. Emma's heart lurched painfully. "Mason!" Then the lioness exhaled again, barely, but enough to break the silence. Emma let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The cub collapsed against her lap, exhausted from fear, its tiny limbs trembling. Ben called from above. "We're ready for ascent! Just give the signal!" Mason looked at Emma, his expression a mix of resolve and dread. "We move her now." Tara nodded, bracing herself with both hands on the sling. "Ben, on your go. Slow. Controlled." Emma cradled the cub against her side with one arm as she steadied the lioness's head with the other. Mason kept a careful hold on the jaw, keeping the airway as open as the angle would allow. The ropes tightened. The harness lifted. The lioness rose inch by fragile inch, her body suspended between stone walls and the cold morning air. Emma held her breath as the lioness's ribs expanded with another thin, shaky inhale. The cub pressed itself into her side, its trust in her total now, utter, complete, heartbreaking. Mason's voice was low, steady, and unyielding. "Come on, girl. Stay with us. You're almost there." Emma whispered softly, "Your baby needs you. Please hold on." The lioness's breaths remained shallow, uneven, uncertain. But they continued. And in that narrow canyon, beneath the slow climb toward hope, Emma felt that spark again, small, stubborn, flickering, not enough to promise survival, but enough to keep her fighting, enough to make every second matter, and enough to remind her that sometimes, even the weakest breath can be a miracle. The ropes pulled taut above them, creaking against the rough canyon ridge as Ben coordinated the slow ascent. The lioness rose inch by inch, suspended between the narrow rock walls while the sling steadied her weight. The cub pressed tighter against Emma's side, making tiny, anxious sounds with every jerking lift of the harness. Emma kept her free arm around it, her instinct to protect as natural now as breathing. Mason moved with the lift, keeping his hands firmly beneath the lioness's jaw. "Easy. Keep her airway aligned. She's still pulling air, but just barely," he murmured. His tone remained calm, but the tautness in his jaw betrayed the truth. One bad shift, one rough jolt, and they could lose her. Tara walked backward up the incline, guiding the bottom of the sling with practiced precision. Her boots kicked up grit as she fought for steady footing on the narrow shelf. "Ben, pull on my mark. Slow, slow. Okay, hold it there," she called. Her voice echoed between the stone walls, sharp but in control. Above, Ben's breathing came through the canyon as loud as the scrape of rope. "Copy! Holding!" Emma stayed low, her hand gently hovering over the cub's back to reassure it. The cub tried to climb toward the ascending harness, tiny paws reaching in frantic motions each time its mother drifted an inch higher. Emma murmured soft reassurances. "It's okay. She's going up first. We're right here. We're not leaving her." The cub let out a strangled little cry, then buried its face in Emma's coat, trembling with confusion and fear. She held it still, her heart twisting at its helplessness. I know. You're doing so good." The lioness's breathing dipped again. One shallow inhale, then a pause much too long. Emma's pulse stopped cold. "Mason, I know." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Come on, sweetheart. Breathe. Breathe." He shifted his grip slightly, lifting the lioness's head another fraction of an inch. A faint gasp shivered through her lungs. Relief washed over them in one fragile wave. "Good girl," Mason breathed. "Stay with me." The canyon narrowed as they ascended, squeezing the air into a thin, cold draft that brushed Emma's cheeks. The morning sun still hadn't reached the ravine floor fully. Its light came in slanted shards through the rocks above, glinting off the metal clips of the harness. It painted the lioness in muted gold as she rose, weak, broken, but alive. Emma looked up through the crack in the canyon ceiling, watching Ben's silhouette brace with the rope. His muscles strained beneath his jacket. "Almost there," he shouted. "She's clearing the main pinch point." Tara planted her feet and guided the harness around a jagged outcrop. "Careful, follow my lead, keep it level." She adjusted angles with the focus of someone defusing a bomb rather than guiding a rescue sling. Emma gently lifted the cub, cradling it close as she rose into a crouch. "We're moving too," she whispered. "We're going up right behind her, I promise." The cub looked up at her with wide, glassy eyes, not wild, not distrustful, just scared. It tucked its small head against the crook of Emma's arm as if she were something known, something safe. The unexpected trust seeped into Emma's chest like a warmth she couldn't explain. The canyon steepened. The walls pressed closer on either side, and loose gravel shifted beneath their feet with each step. Tara slowed her ascent to navigate the narrowing path. Mason carefully followed, still supporting the lioness's head as the sling moved. A sudden crack echoed. Emma's breath snatched in her throat. "Hold!" Tara barked. Ben froze the line immediately. Everyone listened. The canyon fell silent, except for one sound, the faint slide of pebbles trickling down the slope above them. Then, another crack, sharper. Emma's eyes darted upward. A chunk of stone the size of a baseball dislodged from the canyon wall and skittered down, bouncing off the rock mere feet from where she stood. "Rockfall," Ben called from above. "Watch your left." Tara yanked the harness closer to the right wall, shielding the lioness with her own body. Mason crouched lower, arms braced around the lioness's head to keep her steady. Emma shielded the cub with both hands, pulling it into her chest as more debris clattered down the slope like scattered gravel. Nothing big fell, only loose stones, but each one sent tension rippling through the group. Tara hissed between her teeth. "The ridge is unstable. Ben, we need to move faster." "Faster means rougher," Ben snapped back. "We don't have a choice." Mason's voice cut through the rising tension. "Move her, now." Ben didn't hesitate again. The rope tightened. The harness lifted. The lioness rose another 2 feet, clearing the last sharp ledge that had threatened to shift her weight dangerously. The cub cried out, its high-pitched call echoing painfully as it reached toward its mother. Emma held it firmly but gently. "She's right there," she whispered. "Just a little more." The top of the canyon came into view, a rim of sky widening above them as they climbed higher. The sun had finally crested the ridge, flooding the cliff edge with pale gold. For a moment, the lioness's limp body hung in the light, the fur along her spine catching the glow like a fading ember. "Almost!" Tara shouted. Emma felt her legs burn as she climbed, her breath loud in her ears, her arms tight around the cub to keep it from leaping toward the sling. When the lioness finally cleared the canyon lip, Ben and two backup rescuers grabbed the harness and pulled it safely onto solid ground. Their voices rose in a flurry of relief and command, directing, securing, stabilizing. Tara climbed the last few feet and pulled herself onto the ridge with a grunt. Mason turned, his face pale with exertion. "Emma, bring the cub up slowly. It needs to stay calm." Emma adjusted her hold on the cub, its little claws still latched in fear. She pressed her cheek lightly against its head. "I've got you. We're going up." Step by step, she climbed. Her boots found the last foothold. A strong hand reached down, Ben's, and pulled her the final inches onto the ridge. The cub twisted in her arms, its eyes locked on the lioness's still form lying on the ground, surrounded by rescuers. It whimpered, stretching its paws toward her. Emma hurried forward, heart thudding. The lioness lay motionless, her breath a faint ripple beneath the heat packs and blankets the team had hurriedly set around her. Mason knelt beside her, checking her pulse with one hand, while adjusting the portable oxygen mask with the other. Ben looked up at Emma, his expression tight. "We need to move. We've got the transport truck waiting at the trailhead." Emma nodded, settling the cub next to its mother. The little one pressed its face into the lioness's mane, trembling but quiet. For a long second, the world stilled around them. The morning light softening the harshness of the ridge, the wind settling as if nature itself was holding its breath. Emma knelt beside them and carefully brushed the cub's fur with her fingertips. "She's still here," she whispered. "She's still fighting." The cub looked up at her with desperate eyes, and Emma felt a surge of fierce determination rise inside her. "Let's move," Mason said quietly. "We're not losing her now." The team sprang into action, and the race for the lioness's life continued. Now on open ground, under the widening sky, with hope finally within reach but still slipping through their fingers with every fragile breath she took. Ben and two additional responders steadied the harness as they lowered the lioness onto the stretcher board. Her massive frame sagged into the canvas, the rise and fall of her ribs so slight it was almost invisible. Mason knelt beside her without losing a second, checking her airway, then her pulse, then the dilation of her eyes with the focused urgency of a man fighting a countdown he could feel in his bones. "Her oxygen levels are dropping again," he muttered. "We need to reposition her head before we lose the airway completely." Emma stood close with the cub held against her chest. The tiny creature vibrated with fear, its body tense and shaking. She positioned herself so the cub could see its mother, and so it knew she was still there, still fighting. "Tell me what you need," Emma said. Mason motioned toward her. "I'll lift her muzzle. I need you to slide your hands under her neck just enough to support the angle. Don't lift, just hold steady. We can't risk compressing anything." Emma handed the cub gently to Tara, who tucked it securely against her jacket. Then she moved into position, dropping to her knees at the lioness's side. When she slid her hands beneath the massive head, she felt the weight of it, warm, limp, heavy with exhaustion. The lioness gave a weak, broken sound, not quite a growl, not quite a cry, something in between. Emma's breath trembled. "I've got you. I promise." Mason adjusted the oxygen mask over the lioness's muzzle. "Hold that angle. Perfect. Keep her right there." Ben called from a few feet away. "ATV's waiting by the ridge. We need to move now if we're going to make the transport truck in time." Tara handed the cub back to Emma. The little one clung to her immediately, burying its head under her chin. "I'll lead," Tara said. "Mason stays with her airway. Emma, stay close with the cub. Ben, watch the terrain. Karen and Lewis, handle the rear stabilizers." The team lifted the stretcher in one coordinated motion. The lioness's weight sagged against the harness and straps, and Emma could hear the canvas creak beneath the strain. The cub let out a frightened chirp and scrambled higher into Emma's arms. They moved across the ridge trail with the stretcher held waist-high. The path was narrow, slanted, and uneven. Every few feet, the wind kicked up small bursts of dust, stinging Emma's cheeks. "Watch the right edge," Tara warned. "Loose gravel here." Ben angled his body between the stretcher and the drop-off, boots slipping once before he regained balance. "Got it. Keep moving." Emma walked in step with them, shielding the cub as best she could. The little one's breathing matched its mother's in a frantic rhythm, shallow, quick, afraid. Every time the lioness's chest stuttered or paused, the cub tensed, eyes wide with terror. Mason leaned close to the lioness's muzzle. "You're still breathing, sweetheart. Stay with us." He looked up briefly, meeting Emma's gaze. "If she crashes, we'll have to perform airway support manually. That means she can't tilt, she can't twist, and we can't stumble. Even one misstep, we won't," Emma said, somehow steady despite the tremor in her voice. "Just tell me what to do." "Keep the cub calm," he replied. "She can still sense him." The trail narrowed again, this time so tightly that the stretcher had to be angled slightly to avoid scraping the rock wall. The lioness's paws brushed the stone as they maneuvered. A deep, shuddering breath rattled through her chest. Mason stiffened. "Her breathing's changing. Tara, hold." The team froze. Emma's heart plummeted. "What's wrong?" Mason leaned close, eyes narrowing behind his glasses. "She's trying to slip into shock. If we push too fast, we'll lose her. But if we wait too long—" Tara clenched her jaw. "We don't have time to wait." Another breath. Weak, strained, almost silent. Emma shifted the cub in her arms. "She's scared," she whispered to it. "She's fighting. Stay with her. She needs you." The cub whimpered and reached a small paw toward its mother, stretching helplessly. Mason took one long, steadying breath. "Okay, we move. Now, slow and even." They stepped forward again, every footfall deliberate, every shift of the stretcher planned. Ben guided from the front, Tara kept the balance, and Mason monitored the lioness's airway as if her life depended on each angle of her head, which, Emma realized, it did. They rounded the final bend of the trail, and the ATV came into view, a sturdy utility transport vehicle reinforced for wildlife rescue, its engine already humming softly. "Set her down here," Ben called. The team lowered the stretcher onto the ATV bed with surgical precision. Mason immediately checked her pulse again, his fingers pressing firmly into the soft fur of her neck. "She's still with us," he breathed in relief. "Barely, but she is." The cub squirmed in Emma's arms, desperate to reach its mother. She climbed up onto the ATV and settled the cub beside the lioness's flank, where it curled into a trembling ball. Tara secured the stretcher into the ATV bed. "Ben, you're driving. Mason, you stay on airway. Emma, you're with them." Emma nodded and climbed in, positioning herself beside the lioness's head. She placed her hand lightly near the cub, close enough for comfort. "We're going," she whispered. Ben started the engine. The ATV lurched forward and tore down the trail, kicking up dust behind them. The wind whipped past Emma's face as she held her position, bracing against each bump. Mason held the oxygen mask steady over the lioness's muzzle. "Come on," he murmured. "Just a little longer." But as the ATV hit a small rise, the lioness's chest gave a violent, unexpected jolt. Her body spasmed. The cub screamed, a tiny, terrified cry that tore through the wind. Emma's heart stopped. Her airway's collapsing, Mason shouted. Emma, lift her head, now! Emma slid her hands beneath the lioness's massive jaw, lifting as Mason guided. The ATV swayed. Emma gritted her teeth and held tight. Another breath. Barely there. Barely enough. Hold it, Mason urged. Hold it just like that. Emma didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Didn't move. The ATV sped across the open valley toward the transport truck waiting in the distance, its doors open like arms ready to receive. The lioness's breaths, thin, rattling, inconsistent, continued only because Emma and Mason refused to let them stop. The cub crawled onto Emma's thigh and pressed itself against her arm, as close as it could get to both her and its fading mother. Emma whispered, voice shaking but sure. We're almost there. Stay with me, both of you. And with the wind at their backs and the world narrowing into one fragile mission, they raced toward whatever hope the next mile could offer. The ATV tore across the uneven valley floor, bouncing over roots and stones as if the earth itself were trying to shake them loose. Emma felt each jolt through her spine, but she refused to loosen her grip on the lioness's jaw. The cub clung to her thigh, half buried beneath her arm, its frantic breathing brushing warm against her jacket. Every time the ATV dipped or lifted, the cub let out a quivering cry, as if begging the world not to take its mother away. Mason held the oxygen mask in place with both hands, his eyes never leaving the lioness's muzzle. Her breaths are slowing down again, he called over the engine's roar. Just keep her head up, Emma, steady as you can. Emma steadied her arms, bracing her elbows against the vibrating metal frame. I've got her, she said, though her voice trembled. I won't let her slip. The valley blurred past them. Sagebrush, scattered rocks, the wide sweep of pale morning light stretching over the foothills. Ahead, the transport truck loomed larger with every second. Two rescue techs stood ready at the open doors, their silhouettes stark against the brightening sky. But time seemed to contract into a single unbearable moment as the lioness's body shuddered again. The shallow rise of her ribs flattened. Emma felt it like a punch to the chest. Mason, her breathing. I know, he said sharply. Keep her head aligned. Don't let her neck tilt. His fingers moved quickly, adjusting the oxygen mask, checking the airway. His eyes narrowed behind his glasses, his brow furrowing with an intensity that made Emma's stomach drop. The ATV hit a patch of uneven ground. The harness jolted, and then the lioness's body went still, completely still. The cub screamed, a small, heart-wrenching sound so raw that it cut straight through the roar of the engine. Emma felt her own breath vanish. No, 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 don't you do this. Don't stop now. Mason bent closer, his ear near the lioness's muzzle. For a moment, it felt as if the world froze with him. The wind, the engine, even the shaking ground beneath the ATV's wheels. Nothing. No breath. No movement. No sound. Emma's hands tightened around the lioness's jaw until her knuckles blanched. Please, she whispered, her voice cracking. Please breathe. Mason's eyes hardened, not with despair, but with resolve. I'm not losing her, he muttered. Ben, drive straight. No more jolts. Ben shouted over his shoulder. I'm doing everything I can. The ATV surged forward in a straighter line, the terrain smoothing as they reached a stretch of packed earth. Mason placed 2 fingers firmly on the lioness's throat, searching. Emma watched his face. She saw the storm in his eyes, the calculation, the fear, the memory of every animal he had fought for and lost over the years. And then, just as the ATV crested a shallow rise, her chest fluttered, a faint, trembling quiver beneath her ribs. Mason lifted his head. There, she's still with us, Emma gasped, her heart slamming against her ribs. She's breathing? Not enough, Mason said, voice tight. But she's fighting. Come on, girl, give me another. The lioness's chest rose again, shallow, fragile, but real. The cub pressed itself against Emma, tiny paws kneading into her jacket, as though praying for a miracle only its mother could give. Emma wrapped her free arm around it, grounding the terrified creature against her heartbeat. The ATV reached the transport truck at last. Ben skidded to a stop. "Go! Go!" The team moved with precision shaped by urgency. Mason and Tara unlatched the stretcher from the ATV, lifting the lioness with synchronized strength. Emma carried the cub with both arms now, feeling its trembling through her entire body. "In the truck, straight to the mat," Mason ordered. "Get the secondary oxygen line ready." Two techs inside pulled the stretcher in, locking the frame into the reinforced brackets along the wall. The lioness's massive body sagged deeper into the sling, her breaths still thin and scattered. "Heart rate," Mason demanded. A tech pressed a portable sensor to the lioness's chest. "Unstable. Dropping again." Emma felt her knees weaken, but she forced herself closer, the cub tightening its grip on her as if sensing her fear. Mason climbed into the truck, positioning himself beside the lioness once more. "Emma," he said quickly, "I need you right here. Hold her head just the way you did before. If that airway closes again—" "I'll keep it open," she said, without a second of hesitation. She took her place beside the lioness, sliding her hands gently back beneath the heavy jaw. The warmth had dimmed even more now, like a fire flickering against a gust of winter wind. Mason connected the new oxygen line, adjusting the flow with steady hands. "Come on, sweetheart. You're almost safe. Don't stop fighting." The truck's engine roared to life. The cub curled at Emma's hip, one tiny paw reaching instinctively toward its mother's face. Emma leaned closer, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Stay with us. Your baby needs you. We're here. We're all here." The lioness's chest trembled. Once, twice. A shallow breath. Then another, slightly stronger. Mason exhaled shakily. "There she is. Come on, girl." The truck lurched forward onto the access road, jostling the interior. But Emma kept the airway steady, her hands locked into position as if her own life depended on it. The cub pressed its head into her side again. The lioness breathed, not steadily, not strongly, but undeniably alive. And in that crowded rescue truck, barreling down a dusty road toward the only hope they had left, Emma felt that same spark from the canyon. Small, trembling, but bright enough to light the way forward. The lioness wasn't gone yet, and as long as she drew even the faintest breath, neither Emma nor the cub would let go. The transport truck barreled down the rugged service road, its heavy tires thundering over every ridge and rut. Inside the cargo bay, the world rocked in a relentless rhythm, metal groaning, equipment rattling, oxygen lines swaying with each sharp turn. Emma braced herself against the steel bench, her hands firm beneath the lioness's jaw to keep the airway aligned. The cub was plastered to her hip, gripping her coat so tightly its tiny claws pierced the fabric. Mason crouched beside the stretcher, oxygen mask sealed around the lioness's muzzle. "Her breathing's unstable again," he said, voice tight. "Keep that angle, Emma. Don't let her neck dip." "I'm not moving," Emma whispered, though the truck lurched hard enough to slam her shoulder into the wall. Pain shot down her arm, but she ignored it. "Just keep her breathing, that's all." The cub let out a soft cry each time the lioness's chest stuttered. Emma lowered her head close, whispering soothingly, "We're here. She's right here. Hold on, sweetheart." The lioness's breath rattled once more, thin, uneven, barely a whisper. Mason's hand darted to her throat, his brow furrowed. Her pulses dropping again. The tech at the front of the truck called back, "ETA to the facility is 10 minutes. Mason shook his head. "She doesn't have 10 minutes. "Then what do we do?" Emma asked, fear tightening in her voice. "We keep her alive until she gets there," Mason said simply. Not a command, not a reassurance, a vow. A sudden jolt sent the oxygen tank clattering against its straps. Emma instinctively tightened her grip on the lioness's jaw, keeping her airway from shifting. The cub buried its head into Emma's ribs, trembling violently. Outside, the wind howled across the valley as the truck pushed harder, faster, the engine groaning under the strain. The sky had fully brightened now, soft morning gold spilling across the plains in long, quiet rays. But inside the truck, everything felt suspended in a fragile, breath-to-breath battle. The lioness inhaled once, shallow, quick, then nothing. Emma's heart dropped. "She's stopping again. Mason." "I see it." Mason's voice was calm, but the urgency laced inside it was unmistakable. "Emma, lift her head another half-inch." Emma adjusted her hands with painstaking care. "Here? Higher." She lifted again. "Hold it right there." A tense second passed. Then, a faint breath trembled through the lioness's chest. Weak, but there. Emma exhaled shakily. "Come on, girl. Stay with us." Mason stabilized the oxygen line. "We need to get her out of this truck and into the vet bay the moment we arrive. Extraction is going to be tight." Tara's voice crackled through the radio. She was in the lead vehicle ahead. "We're prepping the loading ramp now. As soon as you pull in, swing wide into Bay 2. "Copy," Ben called through the open hatch between cab and cargo. Emma watched the lioness's ribs rise again, then fall in a long, rattling exhale. "She's fading again," she whispered. The cub whimpered and climbed partway into Emma's lap, pressing itself against her as if trying to be close to both her and its mother at once. Mason studied the lioness's lungs through the thin fur. "We're going to need to lift her out fast, but smooth. If we jar her chest too hard, it could stop her breathing completely." Emma nodded. "Just tell me what to do." Mason looked at her, and for the first time since they'd started this nightmare of a rescue, his voice softened. "Just stay with her. She's responding to you and the cub. That's helping her more than you know." Emma blinked hard, but she didn't have time to let emotion take root. Another sharp turn threw the truck sideways, sending medical trays rattling. The cub squeaked and clung even tighter. Emma steadied herself as best she could, keeping the lioness's head aligned. "Hang on!" Ben yelled from the cab. "Rough section!" The truck slammed through a series of dips in the road. Each jolt rattled through their bodies, and the lioness's breathing fluttered dangerously with every impact. "Her airway's unstable," Mason warned. "Emma, don't let go." "I won't," she said, gripping tighter. Then the truck dove into a deeper rut, and the lioness's entire body convulsed. The cub shrieked. Emma's heart went cold. Mason shouted, "Hold her steady!" Emma tightened her hands beneath the lioness's jaw, her muscles burning with the strain. But she refused to move, even as the truck bounced again, even as her knees slammed against the metal bench. "Come on," she whispered desperately. "Breathe. Just breathe." Another convulsion rippled through the lioness. Mason leaned over her chest, adjusting pressure. "She's close to crashing. Ben, floor it." The truck surged forward, engine roaring like thunder across the valley. The cub pressed against Emma's chest, crying softly in panic. "Please," Emma whispered. "Don't give up now." The lioness's ribs lifted the smallest fraction, then fell, then stopped. "No!" Emma gasped. Mason moved fast, lifting the lioness's head higher. "Come on, come on." A heartbeat of silence. Then, a faint gasp shivered through the lioness's lungs. Barely there, but there. Emma felt her entire body sag in relief. She tightened her arm around the cub and pressed her forehead briefly to the lioness's mane. "You're still here. You're still fighting." The truck screeched into the facility yard. "Open the bay!" Ben shouted. The metal doors rolled up. Bright overhead lights spilled out across the concrete floor. Emma held the cub close as Mason and two techs unlatched the stretcher. "On three," Mason called. "1, 2, 3. They lifted the lioness from the truck in one fluid, desperate motion. Emma ran beside them, her boots pounding against the concrete. The cub pressed against her chest. The lioness's breath trembled again, shallow, fading, but still present. "Get her inside," Mason ordered. "Don't stop!" Emma followed them through the doorway into the emergency bay. And for the first time since finding the cub trembling in the grass, they were no longer fighting alone. The impossible extraction was over. But the lioness's battle for life was only just beginning. The emergency bay filled with movement the instant the stretcher crossed the threshold. Voices calling for supplies, the hiss of oxygen tanks, the clatter of metal trays being rolled into place. Bright overhead lights flooded the room, throwing harsh clarity onto the lioness's pale fur and the dark bruising along her ribs. Mason directed the team with crisp precision, his voice steady but edged with urgency. "Get me the IV kit. Tara, check her pulse again. Emma, stay with the cub. Keep him calm." Emma nodded, clutching the tiny lion close as its trembling intensified. Its wide amber eyes never left its mother, even as techs fitted sensors around the lioness's chest and limbs. The cub let out a soft, pitiful cry, a plea so raw that Emma felt her heart twist painfully. The lioness's breaths were shallow, rasping through the mask in a thin whisper of air. Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Her chest rose only slightly, each movement fragile as blown glass. "Pulse is thready," Tara reported. "Pressure's dropping." "Hang the fluids wide open," Mason said, snapping on a fresh pair of gloves. "We're stabilizing her first. Everything else can wait." Emma stayed to the side. The cub pressed against her, its tiny claws digging into her arm. The sterile smell of the bay, alcohol, latex, cold steel, contrasted sharply with the warm, wild scent of the animals. She felt suspended between two worlds, holding tight to the one small life that still believed its mother could wake up if it just stayed close enough. A monitor beeped erratically. Mason glanced at the screen. "We're losing her rhythm again. Dial up the oxygen flow." One of the techs adjusted the valve, and the hum of circulating air grew louder. The lioness's chest lifted again, barely, weakly, but enough. "Come on, girl," Mason whispered, leaning close. "You've gotten this far. Stay with me." Another weak breath. Another pause. Another trembling rise. Emma swallowed hard, whispering to the cub, "She's fighting. Your mama's fighting." The cub nuzzled into Emma's arm and then stretched forward toward the table. Emma stepped closer, giving it the view it clearly needed. Its tiny nose twitched at the familiar scent of its mother. The lioness shuddered again. Mason frowned, her airways still unstable. He adjusted the mask, lifted her head slightly, and signaled for Tara to add another pad beneath her neck. "We need a better angle." Emma instinctively mirrored earlier movements, shifting the cub higher so she could lean in without restricting Mason's space. The cub's gaze remained fixed on the lioness's face, its small chest rising and falling in quick, panicked breaths. "Heart rate is fluctuating," a tech called from the monitor. "She's on the edge." Mason pressed his palm gently against the lioness's shoulder. "Not today," he murmured. "Not after everything." Emma felt the emotion in his voice, a mixture of determination and fear that tightened the room around them. She knew the stakes. Everyone did. Suddenly, the lioness's breathing slowed again, a long, rattling exhale. Emma stiffened. "Mason, I see it," he said. Another breath, weaker, shallower. The cub whimpered and pressed desperately against Emma, trying to reach its mother, and then the lioness's ribs stopped moving. The room fell silent. Mason leaned in, listening. Nothing. Emma's stomach dropped. Her grip on the cub faltered, and the tiny creature nearly slipped from her arms in its frantic struggle to get closer. "Mason, do something," Emma's voice cracked. He didn't hesitate. He adjusted the lioness's jaw, lifted her head, and aligned her airway the way he had explained earlier, only now with a precision sharpened by desperation. "Come on," he whispered. "Not now. Not like this." Seconds stretched. Too long. Too quiet. The cub let out a piercing cry that echoed against the sterile walls. Emma felt her own breath freeze. Then, a twitch. Just the smallest tremble beneath the lioness's ribs. A faint, fragile gasp slipped from her muzzle. Emma exhaled sharply, tears blurring her vision. "She breathed. She breathed." Mason sagged with relief he didn't dare show fully. "There she is. Good girl. Stay with us." The monitors flickered. Heart rate, low, unstable but present, appeared on the screen again. A flurry of motion resumed around them, adjusting fluids, securing the oxygen mask, tightening the sling's support. But Emma saw none of it, because at that moment, something extraordinary happened. The lioness's eyelids fluttered once more, slightly, then again. Slow, heavy, strained. Then her eyes opened. Not fully, not with strength, but enough. Enough to find her cub. Enough to find Emma. The cub froze, then reached out a trembling paw toward its mother's whiskers. The lioness, barely conscious, lifted her head a fraction of an inch, just enough for her muzzle to nudge Emma's wrist. Emma's breath caught. She stared in disbelief. "Mason, she touched me." Mason looked up, eyes wide. "That doesn't happen. Not with wild lions. Not after trauma. Not like this." The lioness's eyes drifted closed again as exhaustion overtook her. But the moment lingered. A moment of impossible trust. A moment earned through fear, instinct, and something deeper Emma couldn't name. Emma pressed a hand gently to the lioness's mane. "We're here," she whispered. "You're safe now." The cub crawled onto the stretcher, curling against its mother with a soft sigh. Mason met Emma's gaze, his voice quiet, but full of wonder. "Emma, whatever happens next, this is something people don't forget." Emma nodded slowly, still feeling the warmth of that faint, unbelievable nudge. She would remember it for the rest of her life. And in the quiet hum of monitors and oxygen flow, with the lioness breathing once more beneath the glow of the rescue bay lights, the impossible moment settled around them. Fragile, precious, and nothing short of a miracle. For a long moment, no one in the rescue bay moved. It was as if the entire room held its breath along with the lioness, suspended in the thin space between fear and hope. The quiet hum of the monitors, the soft hiss of the oxygen line, and the steady beeping of her fragile pulse were the only sounds breaking through the stillness. Emma stayed right where she was, one hand resting gently near the cub, the other lightly touching the lioness's mane, grounding both of them through the storm they had weathered together. The cub had curled into a small ball against its mother's shoulder, tiny chest rising and falling in a rhythm, no longer frantic but exhausted. Emma couldn't bring herself to move, afraid the moment would shatter if she even shifted her weight. Mason finally exhaled, long and slow, the tension in his shoulders easing by a fraction. "She's stabilizing," he murmured, almost reverently. "Weak, but steady." He checked the monitor again, then the lioness's pulse, then adjusted the fluid line. If she can hold this pattern for the next few minutes, she might just pull through. Emma felt tears well up, but she blinked them away before they could fall. The cub stirred and crawled closer, pressing its tiny forehead against her forearm. She whispered, "She's still here, sweetheart. She's fighting." The lioness's eyelids fluttered a second time, not quite opening, just moving enough to show she was still drifting in a place between fear and consciousness, aware of something familiar nearby. The cub let out a faint mewl, nuzzling her lightly. Emma watched the way the lioness's breathing eased at that small touch, the way her ribcage rose just a little fuller. "She knows he's here," Emma whispered. Mason nodded. "Animals can sense a lot more than we give them credit for. He's probably the only reason she clung on this long." Emma felt the cub's warmth seep deep into her coat. The little creature had been trembling for so long, she had grown accustomed to its shaking. But now its shivers were softer, less desperate. It trusted she would keep it safe. It trusted she wouldn't let its mother slip away. Footsteps approached from the doorway. Owen Hale stood with his hat in hand, worry etched across every line of his face. He looked from Emma to the lioness, then to Mason. "Status?" "Barely out of shock," Mason replied. "But she's holding." Emma kept her airway open through half the canyon, the ATV ride, and the entire transport. If she pulls through this, it's because that cub brought Emma, and because Emma refused to leave her. Owen's gaze softened as he looked at Emma. "You did good, kid." Emma didn't answer. She was too focused on the lioness, watching the faint rise and fall of her chest. "She's still breathing," she whispered. "That's all I need right now." The minutes that followed moved slowly. Each breath from the lioness a quiet prayer. Each beep of the heart monitor a flicker of hope. The cub refused to leave its spot beside Emma, its small paw occasionally stretching toward its mother's mane as though reminding her she wasn't alone. The first hints of dawn colored the rescue bay windows, soft gold and pale pink bleeding across the horizon. A new day breaking, a new chance rising. The lioness's breathing steadied, still shallow, still weak, but steadier than before. Her pulse on the monitor evened out into a slow, fragile rhythm. Her body relaxed beneath the blankets in gentle heat, surrendering not to defeat, but to the safety around her. Mason stepped back, exhaling. "She's stabilizing. I think she's finally past the worst." Emma lowered her forehead to the lioness's shoulder briefly, letting out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Thank God," she whispered. The cub crawled into her lap again, curling there as if it had claimed her. Emma stroked the air above its back, careful not to startle it. "Your mama's going to be okay," she murmured. "You brought help. You saved her." As the morning light strengthened, Owen stepped beside her. "Emma," he said quietly, "not many people get a moment like this in their lives. Hold on to it. Remember it. Nature doesn't give second chances often." Emma looked at the lioness, then at the cub, then out toward the growing day. "I won't forget," she said softly. "Not ever." The room settled into a quiet calm. Mason tended to his notes. Tara cleaned equipment. Ben spoke quietly with a tech near the door. But the heart of the room, the reason for all the rushing, the fear, the hope, lay right there on the stretcher. The lioness, alive. The cub, safe in Emma's arms. A fragile family held together by instinct, courage, and a miracle no one could have predicted. The first rays of sunlight reached Emma's face, warm and gentle. She looked down at the cub, now asleep with its tiny paw still resting on her wrist. "Welcome to your second chance," she whispered. And in that quiet bay, with light breaking and hearts finally steady, dawn arrived not just outside, but in the bond between a ranger, a mother fighting for life, and the little cub who refused to give up. A new beginning, a new hope, a second chance carried into the light. If this story touched your heart even a little, let me know by dropping a simple 1 in the comments. No long message needed, just a single number to tell me you were here, feeling this moment with us. And if you want to walk beside Emma and this brave little cub through more incredible rescues, make sure you subscribe and stay with this community. More true stories of courage, kindness, and second chances are waiting for you in the next episodes.